Jay Saran. Welcome to the Heritage and Hustle, Redefining Success in Our Lives podcast. My name is Shivani Patel, and I'm going to be your host for this episode. I'm super excited to introduce our amazing panel of guests that we have today. Before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Ohio, raised in New Jersey, and like most of us that live in this area, I went to Rutgers University. I studied supply chain and marketing. In the professional world, really exploring the different avenues of supply chain. I used to work at L'Oreal, and currently I work at a probiotics company working in external contract manufacturing. In my separate, not work life, I'm currently planning my own wedding. I'm also a wedding planner, and I do a little bit on social media. In terms of Seva, kind of going back to the social media piece, I currently help support the Upholding USA social media channels. Our first guest for this episode is Kajal Patel from Long Island, and I'm super excited to have you with us today.
Thanks for that, Shivani Ben. Hi everyone, Jay Saminarayan. My name is Kajal Patel, and I currently serve as a Vice President, Senior Lead, a Cybersecurity Engineer at a financial services company. Outside my professional responsibilities, I'm also expecting to be a first-time mom, along with living with family and my in-laws. Outside my personal and career endeavors, I actively volunteer at Long Island Mandir with the Community Outreach Affairs. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today to kind of navigate and show you how I navigate through these dynamic roles.
Next with us, we have Stuti Buddhadev. She's also from Robbinsville, New Jersey.
Just starting everyone. Hello, my name is Stuti. I am a clinical nurse leader and a registered nurse in critical care unit, specifically in the cardiac and neurointensive care unit. Aside from my professional journey, I'm also a volunteer at Upholding USA, and I assist with the visitor outreach efforts. And today I am so excited to be sitting with these panelists, and I will be sharing my story, which is about transitions and transformations. So I came to this country at fairly young age, so I will share with you what it was like to navigate through the school system, through the undergrad college life, and then moving away for grad school and coming back home and living with my parents. I feel like amidst all of this, it was my heritage that truly anchored me, and I look forward to unfolding this journey with you all today.
And last but certainly not least, we have with us Ruchi Patel from Jersey City.
Hi everyone, Jay Saminarayan. My name is Ruchi, and I'm currently a fourth-year medical student at Rowan Virtua School of Osteopathic Medicine. I am so excited to be here to kind of talk about my medical school journey and how applying through the match process this year is a little nerve-wracking, very exciting. And I'm excited to kind of dive into that and talk a little bit more about how my medical school journey has been intertwined with my Satsang journey outside of all of my other endeavors. So I'm excited to kind of get into that today.
So all of us here were either first generation, second generation Americans who've kind of migrated either from India, maybe your parents, your grandparents came from India to America, and we're all trying to navigate this unknown world, right? When we were first very young, we were trying to blend the two cultures together and find a way and create a path that's really unique to each one of us. So obviously this American dream or this immigrant dream, really, it's something that we all have. That's something very unique to all of us. So how does that kind of translate into your lives, and how is it maybe different from your parents' interpretation of that dream? Stuti, maybe this is something you want to touch on. I know you came from India, like you said, at a young age. So how did all this kind of play out in your life?
First and foremost, I think this is such an interesting question that you're asking me. And I've thought about it a lot because I feel like that is my entire story. And when we really think about the immigrant dream, or for me, I would say American dream, some of the things that immediately come to our mind, it's first and foremost such a glittery, elusive concept, right? It's all about the white picket fence idealism. And oftentimes when people refer to it, they refer to it as, perhaps owning a home or, giving the next generation a better life than they had. For me, it was a little different because I came here when I was 9 years old. And so I feel like that is such a strange age to be here because you know exactly what's going on. And you also, at the same time, are innocent and lost. And so imagine like a 9-year-old, going to school and standing in the New Jersey school cafeteria and, holding a paratha roll in one hand, and you have everybody else sitting in the cafeteria giving you this, very like unfamiliar, uncomfortable, strange stare as to like what's going on here. And I remember going through school, and one of the things that, resonate, I think, with most of us here is the era of like PB&J. We used to take it to school, and that was the classic like lunch royalty. But when you move from a different country and you see this, for me, I was questioning. I was like, why is PB&J, something so simple, a lunch royalty? But then you have like my paratha roll that people are glaring at, and it is like an exotic artifact. Or, when we would have Diwali, I would be so excited to come back and share stories with my classmates. And I would be like, this is what the festival is about. This is how my weekend went. And I would get blank stares. But then immediately, someone can belt out the jingle bell like it's the national anthem. So for me, I think American Dream wasn't about chasing any of those aspects that, I touched on earlier. I think for me, it was about fitting in to a certain degree. And for my parents, also, I feel that American Dream, for me, when I came here, it wasn't mine. It was my parents, right? For my parents, it was about opportunities. It was about financial stability. It was about giving me a life and a chance at something that they never had in India. And I feel like as time went by, that dream evolved for me because I was the one living it. So in middle school, for example, it was all about, fitting in. So it was all about navigating the cafeteria politics that I shared earlier, or it was all about the awkward school dances. Then high school was all about success. We wanted to get into really good colleges or to ensure that we're participating in extracurricular activities just so it looks good on paper. College was all about this, figuring out who I was, but at the same time with a mix of freedom and independence. And then grad school for me was pivotal because I moved away for grad school. And I think that is when I started to question what my American dream was. And what did that mean to me? What was my immigrant dream? And I think that was the moment in my life that it truly crystallized for me, because grad school happened in my life during middle of COVID. So I'm in healthcare, and my school was really keen on having us in person for everything because they really believed that that was the best time for us to learn. And so that was the moment for me where I questioned, what does that mean to me? And as I think about it more and more, I think that immigrant or the American dream for me became more about personal fulfillment, infused with our heritage and roots and staying true to my culture. And honestly, it wasn't about the aspirations or checking off the list or that white picket fence. It became a journey that evolved. But when I think about all four of us sitting here today, I feel that Ruchi, and I'm imposing this on you because for me, like, this aspect of immigrant dream or the American dream crystallized when I went to grad school and when I moved away. And I feel like out of all of us, you're somebody who is in that phase right now. You're in school. So like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I love that, first of all. I think everything that you talked about in some way, I think all of us can kind of resonate with that. Not just here, but everyone that's watching. And I think that kind of balance. And I hear a lot of the duality of, being Indian, growing up in America, kind of those values kind of clashing, figuring out your path in the world, and how that dream that our parents came here with, how that translates for us. So I think for me, it was a lot more, I was born and raised in Jersey, specifically in Jersey City. So that was, I think for me, that's one of the biggest, I like to say, like, who am I? Like, yeah, I'm from Jersey City. Like, that's one of my first, like, kind of come onto the world introductions that I have. And I think it really is because a lot of us were from different backgrounds. So it was a super diverse kind of upbringing. And my parents, when they moved there, a lot of it was exactly like you said. It was to give us a better life. It was to make sure that all the opportunities there could be would be offered to us. And so there were a lot of things that for my parents, it was mostly about making sure that they had the financial stability to make sure their children could do anything and be anything. And I really truly felt that. So for me, a lot of what you're asking about the American dream or the immigrant dream, and how that kind of manifests for me, is it really wasn't as aspirational or something that was so far distant. For me, it was very much a reality. And so I was born into the idea of I can be anything. And so that kind of brings me here to what I'm doing today, and having those boundaries and like breaking those boundaries. Like, I can do whatever it is out there, and having these conversations with my parents of not having to worry about finances, not having to worry about a home, safety. These things were just provided. It's an incredibly humbling experience. It is very, very privileged. And I'm very incredibly grateful for that. So, for me, going to medical school was something that I wanted from a very young age, and something that I kind of aspired towards for a very long time. But I think the biggest thing was, growing up in a traditional household. That's like a huge thing for sure. But I think for me, it was how to get there, what to do to get there, what kind of schools to look at. My parents they don't have a background in medicine. So how do I kind of navigate that world was really big. But they offered all of those opportunities for me. If I needed to take like SAT classes, my mom would pay for it. My dad would drive me. It was such a wholesome kind of everybody in the family coming together and putting that forward so that we could have that life. And I think same goes for my siblings as well. I have an older sister who has 2 children. I have a younger brother who's in college right now, and I think for us, I think the bottom line was that we could do and be whatever we wanted to be. But with that, a lot of traditional values also came. So we grew up going to mandir every Sunday. We grew up, doing our anik every day, aarti twice a day, thad, everything. And so puja, of course. And so a lot of these traditional values that we had were foundational in our upbringing. And so growing up in American life, that's obviously a part of our identity. But making sure that we don't lose touch with who we are, where we come from, what those values bring to our life is our identity aspect. And kind of the melding of the two is I think such a beautiful manifestation of that immigrant dream. So yeah.
I think one of the things you said that really resonates with me is like having that like bakri or like little paratha roll up. I know when I was younger, my mom, she would also make me the grilled cheese and the PB&J, but she would also make me like other things. And I remember she would take like rotli and then put like a little bit of shak and roll it up. And I would be so embarrassed to take that to school. And she would tell me like, tell your friends it's an Indian burrito. And I feel like that's something a lot of us definitely did, where we turned these traditional things and somehow made it something that everybody can understand, something that's universal, that crosses boundaries, whether it's Indian, American, whatever it is, and finding that fine line. So as second generation or first generation Indian Americans, how did you take some of those traditions, those cultural norms, and turn them into this different modern interpretation? What did you do to make it something that's easily accessible and understandable for the masses?
Yeah, I was going to say that, I have a couple of examples from my life, and more so my story. So a little bit of background to backstory to this example. So growing up, the first couple years, like I said, initial years of my life, I grew up in India the first 7 to 8 years. And growing up, a lot of our memories are blurry, right? Mm-hmm. But then it's a significant pivotal moments in your life that you always remember. Mm-hmm. And for me, all I could recall when I think about my childhood is that every chance that we got, my parents and I would travel with Brahmuksai Maharaj. Mm-hmm. So wherever he is. And, all the festivals had to be spent with Swami. So it would be Fuldol, Guru Purnam, Diwali, and Uttarayan, etc. And so when we moved here, my parents carried those traditions with them because that is their innate nature. So for us growing up, when I was growing up in Edison, New Jersey, our home was not just a place where what we considered a shelter. It was more of, I would say, like a sanctuary. Mm-hmm. And why do I say that is because, my morning started off with Aarti. And then we would have evening artis, we would have thad, and then multiple times a week we would be doing Ghar Sabha to foster connection, to foster unity. So I grew up in a very traditional satsang-centric household. And then weekends were dedicated to sabhas and to sevas. And so that was pretty much my entire life up till I would say when I moved away for grad school and I moved to Chicago. And like I shared earlier, I moved during peak pandemic. And so as we all know, cities were all on lockdown during pandemic. And so when I moved, Chicago to me, as beautiful as it is, it felt like a concrete jungle. I didn't have access to mandir, and I think most of us did not have that. I did not have access to family, friends, seva. I was not doing any seva at that time either. So it was very isolating. And while in the beginning I enjoyed the independence and the liberation because I had never lived away from home and away from family, that loneliness creeped in very, very soon after. And my coursework and the school pace did not help either because in healthcare and the way my program worked, we would have, night shifts and day shifts and clinical rotations. You're on call. So your days and nights feel like an absolute blur. And I think that was the time, to be very honest, that I just felt very disconnected. And I was questioning my faith, my identity, my relationships, even the kind of connection that I had with my family growing up doing Ghar Sabha, being so close-knit with my parents, now felt very sort of aloof. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes, my parents would call me and they would be like, Stuti, do this, do that. And I would be like, no, you don't understand what I'm going through. And I constantly went back and forth with them thinking that, you just don't understand. And we had this disconnect, which we never had previously. So when you ask me that question, I think that part of my life, 2 significant shifts happened. The first one that happened was because I was away from mandir, I was away from my seva. That was something that I realized immediately that I took for granted my entire life because I didn't know a life without it. So this was the first time where I was like, oh, I see the importance of why the value of it. Mm-hmm. And so I lived in an apartment and I had a roommate. And my apartment was basically 2 rooms. And I would say my room was everything. So I would be studying in my room. I would sleep in my room. Even the bathroom, I had the attached bathroom. So literally, even though it was an apartment, I felt like my room was pretty much where I spent 90% of my time. And so in the corner of my room, when I moved in, we had created a small Ghar Mandir. So this Ghar Mandir had the Panchmurti and a small Nilkanthvarni. And something that I will say is back at home, our parents, they do arti, they do thar. Not that we don't, but they're the ones who are taking the ownership of it, right? And they're like, okay, it's arti time, it's thar time, now we're doing this. Here, it became my responsibility. I say it was my responsibility, but I did not even realize it. Because I felt so disconnected from everything, I didn't realize that I was doing all of this because it was just auto mode. And I was doing it because I wanted to feel at home. I wanted to feel close to mother. I wanted to feel close to what was familiar to me. So that Garmandir became the heart of that entire space. The thing that shifted during this entire transition was that we started doing virtual Gursapas. So what that meant was that at that time, Timeless Hindu Wisdom, the series had come out, where santos were referring to topics like mental health. They were talking about prayer, they were talking about faith, resilience, and it was catered during pandemic time. And so I had started to listen to it, and then I got my parents hooked onto it. And that honestly became a way for us to connect.
And Ruchi, I know this is also something that you've experienced. A lot of the things Stuti said, I'm sure you've resonated with and you've understood, and things that you've probably experienced even right now. I know you lived away for a while. So is there anything that you feel like you can add on to?
For me, it was very much when I had to move away, it kind of came as a huge surprise. I actually ended up moving to from North Jersey to South Jersey for medical school, and I didn't know I was going to be moving. So for me, it all happened within 24 hours. I went from working and living, I was working night shift at my job, and I got a call in the morning after I'd finished my night shift, and it was like the dean of admissions, and she was like, yeah, we have a spot for you. If you want to come, you have 24 hours. And I was like, this is like the military. I was like, yeah, I guess this is what I have to do. And so my parents, seriously bless them, they, my entire family actually kind of just came together and moved me down there. But a lot of that kind of, the feeling in that was a lot of fear, a lot of, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have control over anything. What do I do now? And so a lot of that adjustment came with that big milestone that was happening. So for the traditions and kind of incorporating those traditions into my new life, that was definitely a challenge. Medical school, as I feel like everybody I'm sure knows, is lots of studying. That's probably the first thing that everyone thinks. And I think the thing that people don't think about as much when it comes to the studying aspect is kind of what happens and how life kind of goes on outside of you just being in a bubble and studying. And so a lot of that isolation was definitely big for me too. I also lived, breathed, slept, everything in my room. So there were times where I'm like, I need to get out of here and touch the grass to be able to feel alive. But during those moments, it was a lot of traditions that kind of kept me grounded and kept me feeling sane. And I think the biggest one for me was the daily Guru Hari Darshan videos that we had, and my connection to Maharajan Swami, coming from a lot of those resources that we have available. And so I remember so many nights where I'd be up studying, and because it had been hours and I hadn't had human contact, I'm like, I need something. And I'd have the Guru Hari Darshan videos, I think, playing on just shuffle in the YouTube playlist. And that feeling of knowing that I was never truly alone and that I always had Maharajan Swami with me was really big. And I really felt it inside. And I think when everything kind of gets taken away and when your life changes, that's a huge thing that you get to hold on to, is that you always have Maharajan Swami. And so I really felt that during those moments. And because of those traditions, we were talking about earlier, a lot of the anik that we do when we do puja, arti, thar, a lot of these things, I think we don't really realize until, again, everything is kind of flipped on its head, that these are things that really keep us grounded. And not just grounded, but keep us sane and allow us to feel a sense of normalcy and happiness. Because I think in life in general, that's where a lot of these issues kind of come from, is like these big changes that happen and not having the proper tool set to kind of deal with it.
I feel like when you say all of those things, something that immediately strikes out to me is that, collectively, I feel that our parents have worked so hard, whether we moved away or whether we're currently living with them, to sustain that culture, to sustain a piece of India. Then how am I going to turn my future home and my future family? How will that look like? How will we sustain and how will we have our heritage alive within our modern Indian American home? And I often think about this and how would that evolve and how would that translate over? And I am itching to ask you this question, Kajal, because I feel like you are a living dream of this. You're married. You're expecting your first child.
Yep.
And on top of all of this, you live with your in-laws. So how have you, navigated all of this, and how have you, sort of honored these traditions and collectively ensured that, you and your husband sustain this heritage while living this modern Indian American life?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to say what you guys said about doing your personal satsang and how that kept you together during your hardest times. That definitely resonated with me. And I think it translates into this scenario as well. Living with in-laws definitely comes with its sets of joys and challenges, like it does with any other aspects in life. When you live with another family, I think I realized this when I moved in with my husband's family, is that I grew up with my own experiences. I had a different upbringing, and that shaped a lot of who I am today. And in the same way, they also had a different upbringing. They had their own experiences, and that shapes who they are. And it's different, but different isn't always bad. And I think that's something that I realized when I moved in with his parents. But before that, just a little preview to before I got married. Before I got married, my husband and I had actually done long distance for about 2.5 years. We dated during COVID, and he was working in Houston then, and I was in New Jersey. So we didn't really get a chance to really travel much or live together or see each other as often as we would like to. So when we did get married right after COVID, we had the opportunity to live in Houston alone for a whole year before we moved in with in-laws. And during that year, I think it was really foundational to our relationship right now as well, because we basically learned so much about each other. We got a deeper understanding of who each other, I got a deeper understanding of who he is as a person. I also was able to align a lot of the goals that we had collectively come together for. For example, our satsang goals, a lot of our lifestyle goals, our financial goals, what we wanted, what kind of life we were aspiring for, and also our family goals. We also had the time to kind of align on all of those. And then it also deepened our friendship. So when I moved in with in-laws, I never felt like I was moving in with a whole nother family and I didn't have anyone in my corner. I always had a friend in my husband, and for that I was really grateful, and that really helped my transition. But in terms of building a relationship with my in-laws and cultivating open communication within the family, that is something that I had to actively work towards. And I think open communication is extremely important, because that's as a working woman, as someone who is career oriented, who also wants to do seva, who also wants to have a well-rounded lifestyle, wants to travel, wants to raise a modern Indian American family with the Sanskars that I grew up with, but also in this modern world, open communication is key. And there is going to be differences between generations in terms of how they grew up versus how we're growing up. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. But in order to foster that open communication, it's important to build a relationship. Like, think about it this way. Imagine someone coming into your room, your space, and just switching everything up. When you had taken the time to design the kind of paint you wanted on your walls, the kind of furniture you wanted, your decor, your wardrobe, all of that. So how I took that into consideration when moving in with my in-laws is that how would they feel if I just walked in and decided to change everything up? You know, they had lived this way for X amount of years. You know, they had their routine going, they had their own lifestyle. And if I just came in and wanted to change all of that up right off the bat, I don't think that would fit well. You know, and on top of that, my sister-in-law was also living with us. And, you know, like if somebody else came into my home and wanted to kind of switch everything up, especially when I had been living there with my parents, that also, like that would be a little difficult for me to deal with. So in terms of that, I was very mindful. And before even openly communicating, I decided to build a relationship with them. And some of the ways that we did this is the first few months that I moved in, I was purely an observer. And I was just like a fly on the wall. And they already had a lot of their own family rituals. So on Saturday mornings, they would go to a coffee shop and they would sit around a coffee table and, you know, sip coffee, conversate, and then, converse. So they would sit around a coffee table and converse. And then one of the things that they also liked to do as a family was go on long walks, whether there were hikes or walks in the park or walks on the beach. And then they also love to sit around a dining table, share family stories, share laughs. So if they didn't, if like my husband's family didn't initiate that, I would be the one to initiate that. Or I would be the one to tell family that, hey, let's go out for coffee today, even if it wasn't a weekend. Or, hey, I found this cool place, you know, let's go for a hike. You know, try to engage them in the kind of activities that they already enjoy doing. I brought in my aspect as well. So I love board games. So when I first moved in with my husband's family, I had bought a bunch of board games, and I had told everyone that every week, one day.
A lot of board games.
Yes. every week, we would have one day where we'd play board games, and it would be a new board game. And the parents had such a fun time learning how to play the board games. We all grew closer as a family, and that's in a way that I kind of introduced my own hobbies and integrated it with the family unit. And that brought us. The other thing that resonated with me was when you both spoke about how Satsang had helped you in the most difficult parts of your difficult times of your life. And I think that also translates to kind of building a understanding family dynamic and bringing the family together as well. So there's a lot of daily anik that we do together. We do arti together, we do thad together, and then in addition to all of that, we also do Khar Sabha together. And doing Khar Sabha, honestly, is something that we've introduced over the past year, but it hasn't been easy, you know, especially with everyone's busy schedules, especially mine and my husband's. Parents are always accommodating, but I think for us, sometimes like there's late nights at work, or there's early mornings where we have to go to sleep, and then there's other priorities that we have now that we have a baby on the way. There's other things that we may need to focus on. But one way that we try to incorporate Khar Sabha is by just setting a daily timer, or like a daily timer for each week, and just sitting down and doing a proper Khar Sabha each week based on the syllabus. And sometimes we may not even have time to do Khar Sabha as per the syllabus, so we've kind of derived this new term. It's called mini Ghar Sabha. So even if we're having dinner together or if we're having a meal together, we'll read Swamini Vato. Or we'll read a Vachamrita, or we'll do some sort of satsang reading, and we'll dissect that. And we'll take it apart and kind of just get an understanding of how everyone else in the family interpreted that specific Vachamrita or Swamini Vat. And honestly, building a relationship with your in-laws, it is work, but it can be extremely rewarding, and it can be an extremely joyful. It can create an extremely joyful family dynamic. For example, now we're going through this new journey of parenthood, and I had mentioned to my mom that I am craving almond nudud or almond milk, right? And one morning I just woke up and I was making it. So she saw me making it that one day, and she took it upon herself that every day since that day, before I even wake up, it'll be just ready on the stove for me to drink before I come down. And she'll text me. She'll say, "Hey, your almond nudud is ready for whenever you come down." And it's just sweet, like small gestures. It doesn't take a lot, but it just shows that they care. And the reason we're able to get to this point is because we've learned to build a relationship, and we've worked on building a relationship. And my father-in-law will show his love in other ways, where he'll ask me if I've done any exercises or if I've gone for my daily walks, and then also looking after me in terms of career, like, okay, have you had these conversations with your managers? What's next for you? We understand that you're having a baby, but we're here to support you, and if you want to pursue other lens in your career, we are totally supportive of that. And here are some conferences, here are some books that I've read. So everyone has a different way of showing love, but when you build that relationship, it can be extremely, extremely rewarding.
I think so much of what you said resonates with me right now. As I mentioned, I'm getting married this year in August, and so a lot of what we're doing right now is very similar. I also did long distance with my fiance when we first started talking, and we were lucky enough to have that time to live together a little bit beforehand. So when we first started talking, my fiance was in Arizona, and then he quickly had rotations thereafter, so he moved back to New Jersey. Some may say that he picked rotations conveniently near my home. I don't know about that, but he had rotations that were more down south, kind of by where you are actually, by the beach in Tom's River. So for those of you that aren't familiar with New Jersey geography, he lived probably about 2.5 hours away from where his rotations were. So he moved in with my family, which is a very non-traditional thing. You don't really see that too often. It's usually the girl moving in with the guy's family. And this is while we were engaged. So it was pretty early on in our relationship as well. And he and I, not only did we have to learn kind of the nuances of how we navigated our relationship being together kind of 24/7, but also he had to learn my family's dynamic and understand how my family does things. And this was super crucial for us because he grew up as the only Satsangi in his entire family. So not only just like his family unit of the 4 of them, but also his extended family. He's really the only Satsangi. And so for the first time in his life, he got to experience something he's always craved, something he wanted so bad, which is this Satsang unit. And so he would be so eager every day to do arti and do thard, and even like things like Garsaban. Sometimes I was like, okay, like it's okay if we miss one Garsaba, but like he was so eager. Recently it was my mom's birthday, and we had gotten her a gift, and like every typical Indian parent really, she was like, "Bo monguche, like give it back." And so we were like, okay. And so my fiance, he like texted in our family chat, and he was like, "I know what mom wants for her birthday. Everyone, we're doing Garsaba on Wednesday." And it's just like these little things that he looks forward to so much. Kind of like you said earlier, I took them for granted because I grew up my whole life doing Dun Pradna Kirtan. Here's a Vachamrut we're going to like analyze. But for him, it's such a treat. It's such a reward. And that made me change my perspective on how I view those daily aniks, right? And then on the same token, so we got engaged last summer with Swami in the Sammu engagement, and we decided to do our engagement at Mandir, which is pretty kind of conventional for those of us that are Satsangi. However, because his family's not Satsangi, it was something that we really had to work towards to make sure everyone was okay with it. So being that his parents are of a different faith, it was a little bit challenging to have some of those conversations and make sure we're making everybody comfortable in this environment. And it did take a lot of work, the same way you said, but it was so rewarding. So now we, even though he's at my house, we do try to go visit his parents at least once once a month, if not more, to make sure we're working on that relationship and building that connection. And my parents, they always tell me, they're like, "Dame beo tiajao," to make sure you still do garsaba, even if it's just the two of you. And at first I thought it was so like almost weird. Like, I'm like, what are me and him gonna talk about by ourselves? Like, garsaba is supposed to be, like you said, seeing how different people, how they analyze the same bachan with their like understanding other people's perspectives. And we made it a point to kind of continue those aniks even when we're at his house. So we'll do arti in the morning, we'll do thard in the evening, and we'll try to do garsaba. And so recently, he has a dog as well. So one time we were doing evening arti, and his mom and his dog came over to the mandir room, and they started doing arti with us. And in the moment, it was just something so touching for me, because I was like, one, like his mom learned the arti, which also, like, if you don't have satsang, if your family's satsangi, again, it's something you take for granted, but seeing the effort and the time that she puts into respecting my faith, even though it might not be identical to hers, was so important and so special to me. And then a similar situation, a few days later, we were upstairs. I'd come down after doing my puja and everything, and I'm like, why do I know that bhajan? Like, what is that tune? I named that tune, and it was a bhajan. And I looked over in the family room, and his parents were watching one of the Guru Hari Darshan videos. And it's just these little things, kind of like your dud, that's so small, but it's like the effort that they put into making sure that I feel comfortable when I'm at their home too, really did mean a lot to me. So it's two things that, although very small, did kind of showcase that even though we're living in this completely different dynamic, most people have kind of in our world, right? Like, we're usually in these satsangi homes and we don't notice these things. We do take these things for granted. And so seeing the effort that they put in makes me want to put in so much more effort to make sure I'm continuing to build that relationship with them, whether it's through frequent visits, phone calls, texting. His mom's like a big WhatsApp person, and so like I don't really use WhatsApp, but like I make it a point to like send updates to them or call them, and just making sure that we're doing things equally and everything that we do is supporting each other. So it's been really special to kind of navigate through all of that. And I have a similar dude story to you. I'm lactose intolerant, and so when his mom learned that, she was like, "Oh, really? Like, I've been feeding you all these things." I'm like, "I know, but like I've just been eating them because I don't want to like offend the family." And ever since that day, she got this like machine that makes like any plant-based milk.
Wow.
And so every day, like, I come down, she's like, "What milk do you want today? Like, here are all the things. Do you want oat? Do you want almond? Like, what do you want? Here's some dates to sweeten it." And it's just, again, like these little moments that really show that no matter what background we come from, no matter which family we're really a part of, we all can control what the future looks like, whether it's for these in-laws that we're living with or the future families that we're creating. So it's just been a great experience to kind of navigate this, and I'm very inspired to hear from you and see what kind of you said and take some of that into the way I contribute to my in-laws as well. We talked a lot about the heritage piece, so I think we talk a little bit about the humility piece now. I know that a lot of times in the Indian families that we're in, sometimes when you achieve something, it's often a collective victory, right? Mainly because our parents came from another country, so we feel like whether it's graduation, sometimes you'll see people putting their hoods on their parents, things like that, because it is really just a family victory. So whenever we have this dynamic and these instances where it feels like these family victories, how do you still find time to make it your own? And I know, Ruchi, this might be something you're kind of going through right now with med school, especially as you're coming up with match. So how is this something that's played up in your life?
I think that's a great question. I think the most beautiful thing that our family, our culture, our parents, Eastern society, right, kind of teaches us is that our victories, it's that humility aspect like you're talking about. A lot of our victories, a lot of the things that we get, a lot of the successes, it's very much collective because you didn't get to where you got to just by yourself, right? And I think understanding that is huge. Living it and kind of using that in your day-to-day life is like the gratitude, right? I think that's like the big overarching term. But for me, especially, I think on this medical school journey, I know for a fact that there is no way I could have done what I've done and continue to do what I do if it weren't for my family. Both my personal family, my mom, my dad, right? My nuclear family, as you would say, and my satsang family. I think that's the best thing that Swami has given us is this satsang family.
In the same way, we've also seen another quality in the Satpurush is their humility, right? No matter what accomplishment, we talk about Robbinsville Akshardham or North American Akshardham, really, and even something as grand as that, it means nothing in the way of ego, because the Satpurush is so selfless and only wants to give to the greater good. So I know both of you guys, Stuti and Kajal, you're in fields that are very demanding and fields that your accomplishments and your achievements are really kind of based on your title, right? It's what have you achieved? How far can you climb up this corporate ladder? And so even in difficult workplaces and difficult environments like that, how do you still maintain your connection to having that humility and making sure that you're not letting these things maybe get to your head? So I don't know who wants to answer that, but maybe Kajal, is that something that you've experienced, and how have you managed
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the first phrase that comes to my mind, and I've grown up hearing this phrase my entire life, is Maharaj Nicha. But a lot of times, Maharaj Nicha is associated with something negative, right? We didn't get the test result that we wanted, Maharaj Nicha. We didn't get the job offer that we wanted, Maharaj Nicha. But I think even in the good times in our lives, we should remember that, right? Especially, like, yeah, absolutely appropriate for me to remember Maharaj whenever I'm grieving or going through something difficult in my life. But I think it's even more important for me to remember him when I'm actually being given a blessing. And a lot of the stuff in my life, whether it's my family, career, health, everything that I'm grateful for is an answer to a prayer or a blessing that he's given to me, And anytime there is any major win or any major success that I experience in life, that's the mentality I strive to live with. That, thank you, Maharaj. I'm here because of you. I could have put my 110% in, but if it wasn't Maharaj Ni Icha, it wouldn't happen for me. Like I can do all the Purusharth, and I can put in like all my effort, but ultimately it's up to him. If he wants to give it to me, he will give it to me. So sometimes in career success, yeah, it can get to your head, but I think having the mentality that whatever happens is because of Maharaj Ni Icha helps me stay grounded.
And I think also resonates with me because I work, as you all know, in an intensive care unit. So the whole aspect of Maharaj Ni Icha, it's truly that 24/7. And, every time I go to work, it's fulfilling, but also at the same time, it's demanding. So something that I remember all the time is Brahmsai Maharaj, and you mentioned that earlier, in the joy of others lies our own. And I often see my career and my seva and satsang as the same side of a coin, right? And what I mean by that is that my career is all about service, and seva and satsang is serving other people too. One is about serving your patients. The other one is serving the larger community. And that perspective is what I feel keeps me really grounded because life is fleeting and you get to see that firsthand. And so oftentimes when I think about just that particular moment of service, to me, the humility aspect becomes about the impact I can have on other people.
Great job of really tying in all the aspects we talked about of our identity, managing different family dynamics, and also just the grind, the hustle that we're all doing to make sure we achieve that success and that immigrant or American dream that we're all kind of achieving. So thank you guys for being guests on today's podcast. It was great catching up. It really just was such a unique experience to talk about all of this with you. And thank you so much once again for taking your time to be a part of this.
Thank you.